welcome to Mediterranean Fire with your host, Biba Sheik, and co host, Ed Gardner. Thank you for being here. You are on Wjzz Cool TV. Today, we are going to speak about the art ecosystem and the you could say the benefits of organizing more intricate, larger events that seem more complicated, but that are much better in the long run. Ed, you have a lot of experience
I
in
do,
this,
and
so
it's funny because I've lived in 5 or 6 different cities, and I've lived in cities where they have major art events, like
mm-hmm,
monthly art events,
mm-hmm,
like a gallery crawl where all the galleries are open in the same night, or, you know, things like that. And we here in Detroit, we've had festivals, and
mm-hmm,
currently we don't have any festivals except the September month of design
mm-hmm,
and de-electricity, which is usually, or now anyway, has been a part of that.
mm-hmm.
And having those kind of events in a art ecosystem, as it were, brings a lot of people in who don't normally participate in the
Exactly.
art world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it also gives a lot of artists and a lot of creative people, because that's the thing. I mean, you look at festivals, and you look at filmmaking,
Mm-hmm.
or large events like that. There's a lot. It isn't just that you've got an art festival and there's artists who have booths. It's that there's artists designing the event itself.
Mm-hmm.
There's musicians playing music. There's people who handle the lights and
Mm-hmm.
people who handle the sound. And it's just like when you're in filmmaking, filmmakers use every other art form. They have an art department, they have
Mm-hmm.
props, they have wardrobe,
Right.
they have set designers, they
It's
have
like
lighting
it's
people.
like an institution with no building.
Yeah. And it employs a lot more people
Mm-hmm.
than just a painter in their studio and a gallery that sells their art.
But I wonder if it really does, because a lot of times these are municipality type projects where they delegate to all of the galleries that, hey, like in Spain, I remember they have a white night. Uh, I can't remember if it was art or museums, but many institutions all on the same night would be open all night, and there would be performances all night, and people could go from space to space to all those. And I've seen it. I've seen in Detroit also. The I don't remember the names of them, but I think around Christmas time they start having like a few nights where all the galleries participate together, including institutions in Detroit, like the International Institute of Metro Detroit, along with, different, those kind of institutions as well. And, they put performances on, and they have like a sort of a theme. But what I've seen with those is also it's just it's like a put a penny in your pocket. So the artists are going there, and okay, of course they're rehearsing. They probably already have something rehearsed, anyway, and they're spending a lot of time there, and they wait until their turn, and then they go on the stage and they do something for maybe sometimes only 15 minutes, and then they leave while, but I guess and then for them to get, larger artists in those events, people who are already well known by the general public, those would be paid artists. But I wish that the municipalities would funnel more funding in for all the artists that participate in these events. I mean, it reminds me also of the Spanish flamenco artists in Spain. It's the same procedure. It's the municipality, and they organize different concerts and different dance performances in different places, and they have a yearly festival, and it's the municipality again, and they choose who the artists are, you know. So they can't choose everybody. So
Yeah, they curate it,
mm-hmm,
but and it's similar to, like, we used to have Taste Fest in Detroit. Taste Fest was a large festival, it lasted
mm-hmm,
for a long Fourth of July weekend,
mm-hmm,
and there was music performances. They usually, I think there were 4 stages,
mm-hmm,
and the stages were curated. They were different themes on different stages, and the large stage was where they would have the large performers.
mm-hmm,
The big bands.
mm-hmm,
The people
mm-hmm,
who were nationally or internationally known.
mm-hmm.
But then they'd have other stages where it was local bands, and
Right.
Dally in the Alley
Mm-hmm.
follows the same format,
Yeah.
and
And so does
Festival of the Arts
the
follows that formula.
Biennale of Flamenco in Spain follows exactly the same.
Yeah,
The younger artists are given spaces on the street where they can perform.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and it's good because it gives a lot of artists the opportunity to perform for people who wouldn't normally see them.
Mm-hmm.
Because for most musicians, if you're a band or you're a singer songwriter, that kind of musician, you're limited to bars and restaurants and
Mm-hmm.
coffee
Mm-hmm.
houses,
Mm-hmm.
and so you're limited to the people who normally
Right.
come to that place.
And what I've seen also, exactly, it's like those two circuits are kind of interconnected. And what happens that I've seen is that, like, every year there will be like one or two of that circuit of artists, that they're younger and they're still like in the studio sort of, but they've done now their first, second, or third performance, and they're doing it in this festival, on the young people's platform. But for some reason, there was something more poetic about it. It was and then the newspapers catch it because there was sometimes there's something daring about it, or it's something they've never seen before, or they like the theme, you know, and then just from that moment on, they kind of take a position, on the larger stages.
It's how they, it's a progression. It's like you start in your garage or your basement,
Mhm.
and you play a party maybe,
Mhm.
and then I mean, for most new bands, playing a festival where there might be 500 or 600 people watching you is a big deal.
Mhm. Yes.
I mean, and even if they're playing like Saturday morning at 11 o'clock,
Exactly.
when there aren't
Mhm.
that many people walking around
Mhm.
yet,
Mhm.
it's still a big deal for them to be on a stage of that level.
Mhm.
But
Yes.
it's how, and also it, for a lot of them, they never really had a chance to play on that level of equipment even.
Mhm.
you know they're used to playing in small rooms, and having a big room or an open air room,
Mhm.
means that you're now playing at a level, volume wise and everything else, where
Mhm.
you've never done that before. It
Mhm.
gives them a way to get a taste of that
Yes.
without opening for the Rolling Stones.
Mhm. Yeah, I read a book once that really changed and like opened my mind, and every time I do a project, I think about it. It changed me completely because it was like going from doing performance and rehearsing and creating characters and the whole process. But then the book that I read uh, informed me that not only the performance is important, but the context of the performance, and you know, the different kinds of art that can be born just from this relationship with the environment, whether it be folkloric art or pure art or art therapy or art with a social significance, underground, all of this. So the book was Adorno, and it's a really, really big book, but he goes through philosophically all of the different lines of art and also the different contexts of their presentation.
And different mediums too, not just
Mm-hmm.
not just like fine arts and music or
Exactly.
theater, but
Mm-hmm.
all of them,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
and how they focus in different directions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we forget that there's more to it. I mean, even music. I mean, people are using music in hospitals,
Yes.
right? And it's part of the healing process.
Well, music and medicine were two parts of the same sphere, before, and then they became segregated. Um, the work of Grotowski is something I really respect a lot because I really, really thought about it a lot. Um, they have groups of people that are singing and dancing, and after a lot of energy training, which most people don't know about, but it's and everybody's dressed in white, just like the old medicine man, and just like they dress all in white in a hospital as well. And Grotowski's whole family were doctors working in a hospital, and he went off to do theater. And his theater is like a healing machine. It has a lot of healing elements to it, and he traveled around the world to many different countries, to cultures in the Far East, in Africa, in India, and he had a guru also, and he did this like when nobody was doing this in the 60s, early 60s, and he was making exchanges with performers all over the world, and from this came, one more generation of his work, and then the field of performance anthropology was born from it. So all of these techniques from different parts of the world were being, discovered, and especially the ancient ones that had a lot of energy transmission in them, because energy work can be used for healing or spirituality like a religion, but it also can be seen in the context of art. So when you see it in the context of art, you don't to see it as someone who's going to a temple to pray. You see it in the context of creating, physically, and it's a question of the presence itself. It's a performer that can walk on stage and do absolutely nothing, and the public is completely captivated. Or just if you see just playing the drums, without any other movement, it's and just the poise and the straight back, is it's a huge thing. Um, and
Well, it's definitely ritualistic. I mean, music, dance,
yeah.
performance.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
it really got its part. It started as a celebration and as a ritualistic process,
Yeah.
something that brings the tribe together, brings the
Mm-hmm.
community together.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's no different going to a rave and being in a sea of
Mm-hmm.
breathing people.
Yes.
It's
Yeah, it's
ritualistic.
another part of the world that invented that, and
Yeah.
that's what they do in that part of the world. When in other parts of the world they do other things, and yes, one uses another part of the brain, the more contemporary part of the brain, and maybe a little bit more of the nervous system, and the more futuristic, while the other one would be less, not looking so much into the future. Like if you take a song from David Bowie now, when before it was extremely, like, almost futuristic. It was a mystery, and it was, but if you would just, take away all the hype surrounding, David Bowie and everything, and just look at the song for itself, you know that that song could live on for like 200 years, and people could listen to it in 200 years, and it would they wouldn't see it as any different from that, Indian drummer. That it would just be, you know, the music and the words and the voice that's almost like a cry, are just as visceral, and the expression of a spirit in all ways as would be, somebody from Africa or from another part of the world.
Well, I think that's telling that, a lot of artists, I mean, even the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, I mean, but, a lot of artists have gotten to know musicians in Africa, in Cuba, in, South America. They've gone and met those people and
Yes.
played with them.
Yeah, you
Right?
make
Like
me think of the Beat
musicians want to
Generation.
play with other musicians, and
Mhm.
it's a universal language,
Mhm.
music.
Mhm.
So you don't have to speak the language of, their language to be able to play music together.
Right.
And that, you know, that's an amazing thing. But I think one of the big differences is that music originally wasn't a consumer product.
Mhm.
It was a participatory product. It was
Mhm.
something that people played.
Mhm.
And, I saw once an article about how, before radio,
Mhm.
before records, in the late 1800s and even in the really early 1900s, everybody owned an instrument.
Oh.
In the
Yes.
Old West,
Uh-huh.
people had instruments. They had
Mhm.
fiddles, they had banjos, they had
Yes.
guitars.
Mhm.
And every town had like a place in the center of town where there was a bandstand where people would come together and make music.
Mhm.
And with the advent of radio and recordings,
Mhm.
it shifted. It
Oh.
shifted to being where to produce music in those realms, you had to have a lot of money,
Mhm.
because that the analog recording industry was expensive. Only big companies and big radio stations could afford to
Mhm.
do that.
Mhm.
And so it kind of shifted from being something everybody did to being something people bought.
Imagine how people had their cell phones now. If you imagine that cell phone that everyone holding was actually an instrument, a different instrument that everyone had.
Or if there was, it's funny because with TikTok and with the various social media platforms, everybody is a filmmaker, everybody's a photographer.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
if you look at TikTok, you see a lot of dancing and singing performances.
Yeah.
And it's I love it because as a filmmaker myself, we really got to a point where anybody can go make a movie.
Yes. You are watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world, streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, and other top media platforms. Like, follow, share, and subscribe. And thank you for watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. If you're just joining us, we're on Mediterranean Fire, speaking with Ed Gardner, and talking about the organizational aspect of art and art anthropology, as well as right now the celebration aspect of music and how it was, in the 1800s and how it is now, and will be shifting and kind of floating and into other
We're
other
floating, yes.
conversations.
Art is our connection to the divine. And whether
Mhm.
you're a musician or whether you're a painter
Mhm.
or a dancer
Mhm.
or an actor.
Now that's to say, if you say that like a blues musician or a acid rock musician or something, they might not like explain it in those terms. But from where you're standing right now, you're kind of taking a step back to speak about it sort of philosophically. I think people should know that this what you're saying right now is it pertains to everyone, and it doesn't, because I've had conversations where people try to seem to have a conflict between something that is like considered divine or sacred or like energy work, as opposed to that other, street, street feeling and music that's born from social gatherings and bars and the hardness and being alive after experiencing so many harsh things. That is the most divine, and divine doesn't mean that you are just sitting, and meditating for nothing. It means you're meditating because you have already done the opposite, and that you have experienced a lot of grief. That's why you are an artist, and because you shifted things inside of you so many times just through making artwork. So I hope that this paradox, imaginary paradox between energy work and gurus and divinity and the other Dionysiac beat art can finally become a paradigm. That means not a conflict and not
I don't
a
make
paradox,
that distinction of
but
divine is separate
paradigm.
from anything else. It's like
not you, I know.
divine is everything. It's like all one.
Mm-hmm.
And music, art. I mean, when I paint, I don't like think about what I'm painting. It just comes out.
You paint?
I do paint.
Oh, well, what do you paint?
I paint whatever I paint when I'm painting it. It's like art. It's like you look at small children, little children.
Mm-hmm.
They're all artists.
Yes.
Everybody's an artist until they get programmed out of it because somebody says get a real job or go study something where you could make a living.
Kandinsky had a story. He said that a woman had questioned him about his art, and she said, but I don't understand, because my 3-year-old daughter can, draws like that. And Kandinsky said to her, yes, your 3-year-old daughter does draw like that, can draw like that, but your 10-year-old daughter, no.
That's right. That's exactly right. I have a painting that my 2 older sons made for me.
Mm-hmm.
Their mother art directed it.
Mm-hmm.
And they did it when they were 3 and 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a large canvas. It's about 3 by 3 feet. And they painted it.
Mm-hmm.
And I have it on my wall next to a whole bunch of paintings by people with art school backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
And it holds its own.
Yes.
People don't know that was painted by a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. They just go, oh, that's really cool.
I saw a painting by a 5-year-old when I was in Amsterdam in someone's house that I had met, and the boy's father had committed suicide, and ever since that, so now like 20 years had passed, but she had on her wall the drawing that her son had made after that happened, and it was of 2 trees, and their branches were growing together, and it, it was a very large, a lot of branches that were intertwined together. I think there were also 2 figures there under the tree. I'm not sure, but it was really, what can come out subconsciously, that it tells you also that a spirit maybe is ageless, or they're just you know.
So this idea, it's like prodigies, right? I mean, little children can make art, they can make music, they can play,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and we have these children that, oh, they play classical music when they're 5 years old, they're prodigies,
Mm-hmm.
right? We call them prodigies,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe they're just like haven't been messed up yet,
Mm-hmm.
you know. It's like our educational system doesn't come from this idea that people are already whole and complete. It comes from the idea that we need to
Oh,
add something to
yes.
them to make them better,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it just seems backwards to me. It's
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's
Mm-hmm.
all this emphasis on making them different from what they are,
Mm-hmm.
and yet they have all these abilities as small children that are perfect already,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yes.
And
That's why we come to a point, you know, where sometimes we talk about the importance of unlearning.
yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know, having music programs in school and art programs in schools is, you know, I mean, I remember when I was in school, you know, in middle school and even in high school, my art teachers and my music teachers were some of the most influential people in my life.
Me too,
You
definitely.
know, because they allowed me to express myself,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to some of the other classes where it was like, keep yourself inside a box, don't
Yeah.
color over the lines, kind
Well,
of thing.
I think for me, I just felt like much more comfortable around the music teachers and the art teachers and theater teachers, while the rest of the time I felt like I was um, spending most of my time like, I don't know, being an outcast or not, you know, taking a lot of, like, on a daily basis, you know, being cut down by you know, the children.
Right. Yeah, it was less rigid. It was more natural,
Mm-hmm.
and you got acknowledgement easier because it wasn't about memorizing something,
Mm-hmm.
memorizing a language, or
Mm-hmm.
knowing the rules of
Yeah.
English, or
Mm-hmm.
you know, knowing math. And I think mathematics is really creative, but not the way it's taught in our schools.
Absolutely. I
You
went
know?
also to when I went to Lebanon, and I understood how they were teaching mathematics over there in the Arab world, where it was actually invented. It was just so much simpler, so much like really down to earth, you know, and you could really understand that, you know, where it sprung from, and it wasn't like cut off from its original definition as it is now, and you know, it feels now like it's just it's somehow not understandable. I remember also in school, you know, well, first of all, I was trying to do good, but I remember like one time I think I got a cold, I had a fever, I had to stay home, and when I came back to school to the science class, just because I had missed 1 or 2 days, I was completely lost, and from there I couldn't catch up anymore, and I mean that extended to the next year because I was already lost. So, and then I learned that it was a hierarchical system, and that everything in that system, if one thing is wrong in that system, then it disqualifies the whole thing. And at a very young age, I understood that, and I couldn't allow myself to spend my life learning that if one thing in that was wrong, which I was convinced there is something wrong with it, but I mean, of course, that's just because I'm not a left brain person, but I'm sure other people who are extremely gifted in science and math and everything are, you know, are in a much better situation than I am. But I just I would always come out doing good in, you know, the art classes and, you know, and all that.
Yeah. It's interesting though, like you know, you talk about scientists. I was reading recently about, you know, the fact that quantum physicists and gurus like the Dalai Lama and people like that are increasingly working together and have agreements about reality.
I'm sure they do,
You
because
know,
they're talking about the same thing, just like a philosopher is talking about, the same thing that they are too, but it's just it's a different language. It's like a different level of consciousness, or it's a different, it's the same, talking about the same thing.
it really is. It's like, all these different disciplines, whether you're a biologist or a geologist or a quantum physicist or the Dalai Lama.
Mm-hmm.
You're We're all dealing with reality. It's just that there's different languages.
Mm-hmm.
There's different vocabularies.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
like
Yeah.
doctors have a vocabulary, lawyers have
Mm-hmm.
a vocabulary,
Mm-hmm.
financial service people have a vocabulary,
Right.
artists have a vocabulary,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yes.
it's all different
Now,
ways of looking at the
come
same
to
thing.
think of it, one of the most vibrant festivals in Detroit is the Concert of Colors, right? And I think the initiator of that is actually coming from a much more scientific and mathematical background, which I don't know too much about them, but I know that they were working more like in the field of health, and almost on a governmental level. So.
I love the Concert of Colors. I got to help with it one year, a few years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been going to it for at least 10 years, and it's always so vibrant and it's so diverse. It's like they bring in people from all over the world,
Mm-hmm.
and even the last 2 years when it was done virtually rather than live. I mean, this last year they mixed that up a little bit. It was just amazing, the opportunity to be there and walk around, and the thing I love about festivals is that the performers, the musical performers, and if it's an art festival, the artists, I mean, people aren't just there performing, they're also part of the audience.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go to Concert of Colors, and all those people who are performing, when they're not on the stage, they're in the audience,
Mm-hmm.
and they're walking around, and they're experiencing Detroit, and they're experiencing the people of Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same with the Festival of Arts. It's the same with the Taste Fest. It's the same with Eats and Beats.
Mm-hmm.
You've got all these bands. I mean, when we used to do the People's Art Festival, we had 45 different bands, and every one of them were there for like the whole day, not just for the 30 minutes they were on stage.
Yes.
They were hanging out. I mean, we had a VIP lounge for them.
Mm-hmm.
They were hanging out and partying and
Mhm.
walking around and looking at the art, and they bring their friends, and
Yes.
that's what's available out of doing those kind of large events, is that it becomes a whole community of creative people and their family and friends, not just 3 bands on a stage at a bar. And even 3 bands on a stage at a bar, they're bringing their family and friends. And it's still a celebration, even on a small scale.
You are watching Mediterranean Fire on WJZZ Cool TV, streaming live on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and other top media stations. Like, share, follow, and subscribe. And thank you for watching WJZZ Cool TV. We're talking to Ed Gardner, and thank you for joining us. So Ed, so what if the coronavirus was not here? What would you like? Now, what's going on now? Would you have organized another, a huge event with different artists, or what do you think the coronavirus has done now to this social field and the festivals, and what's going to happen next? Do you think we're really moving online?
I think that, it's interesting. I think that in the beginning, it was viewed as a problem. But I think people evolved. I think people have, there was a huge adjustment period where people, were doing everything on Zoom, and the people who did large-scale events, I mean, from Disney down to the local bar with 3 bands, they were all struggling to come to grips with how they could survive financially and what this all meant for the future. And a lot of performers, I think the performers actually drove the adjustment, because so many performers, whether they were actors or musicians or painters, they all like seized upon the virtual presentation, and they played with it. They tweaked it. They didn't just do it one way. They created sets in their living room. I mean, John Krasinski created a talk show in his living room and was doing a talk show, and he would have people come on as guests via Zoom, and it was like amazing.
And then the style of the presentations changed completely also. So like in the entertainment sphere, you could see people doing gymnastics within a dance that was just like to the extreme, and then when we had to go online, suddenly it was like we stopped, and we didn't have makeup on, and it was just like more the interior, really the person, and we were seeing them in their intimate
space. It became more authentic. It was like a lot of people were doing things online without makeup and just being really at home, like being humans, not superstars, and so many musicians, I mean, especially smaller singer-songwriters or duos, people like that, they were doing concerts online, and some of the clubs, like I have a friend who's my friend Michelle Held, she's a singer-songwriter. She was doing things with the Ark in Ann Arbor, where the Ark was having Zoom concerts, and they had different performers, and everybody had their own room where they were performing from. Their own, it was their living room, or it was like go down to your friendly filmmaker's studio or whatever. But it was like people quickly figured out how to make it happen. Musicians who had never done video, who had never had to operate a board of sound or lights, were all of a sudden teaching themselves how to handle all these other things. And also people who were in different disciplines. Filmmakers were helping musicians, and musicians were helping artists, and it was like all these creative people were crossing over and helping each other in different mediums. And it's interesting because in Detroit especially, I don't know if this is true in other places in the world, but in Detroit, pretty much everybody who is a musician is also an artist or a dancer or something. It's like nobody does just one thing. They have this huge mountain of self-expression, and one medium isn't enough.
Especially in the field of performance, you write, you act, you produce, you direct, you do the set design, you do the publicity.
And musicians themselves don't just play one type of music in Detroit. It's like, I had a friend, my friend Richie, who owns Lo and Behold in Hamtramck. He was in 8 different bands at one point, and every band was different. One was a country band, one was a big band, one was a blues band, one was a rock band. And I see that a lot, where you have all these people who are playing music with different collections of people.
But there's something also really beautiful, and I'm still discovering it. I've only discovered a little bit of it, because it's not like out, in front of you. It's not in the media so much, and there isn't a lot of, mainstream media, in Detroit. Not only Detroit, but I mean, compared to Europe, Michigan would be the size of Germany itself, a whole country, and I feel like the national media is much more prominent than the local media itself. I don't know, to me.
You mean in Detroit?
In Detroit, and maybe in all the states, I don't know.
Well, I think if you get to the big cities like New York and LA, they have local newspapers
And you
that are
think,
read way outside
okay,
their
okay.
community.
And what cities? What cities now? What cities do you think are like that? New York, California, Georgia.
Well, I think that you've got cities that are global cities, and you've got cities that are regional cities.
And what would Detroit be?
Well, I think Detroit's kind of a mix because the automobile industry is global.
Mm-hmm.
And, so we have people in that industry who are traveling globally all the time.
Mm-hmm. And we have the connection to Africa a lot more than other states.
In Detroit, you think so?
I think so. Yeah.
Why?
Because people are more connected with Africa here, and they're dedicating their art to the diasporic everything, in this city where it's based on immigrant communities, and and so everybody in the city who is coming from that immigrant background still has, like, I wouldn't say one foot in the other country, but has a glance,
As an awareness of it, a
Yeah.
consciousness of
yeah,
it.
and including the Africans. I guess there is a difference between the Africans who have a history of the slavery that happened here, and the Africans whose parents came over as immigrants, in the past, in the few generations,
Right.
But in the art field, all of the African American artists which I've spoken to, which maybe is not a lot because I'm still kind of new here, travel to Africa, and in some cases even decolonize themselves. And the whole futurism movement, which I recently discovered, is absolutely based on decolonization.
Yes, and Ingrid LaFleur, who's one of the founders of that, ran for the mayor of Detroit a few years
Yeah,
back.
I didn't really know because I just got here and I'm just discovering all this.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
But Detroit has a long history of immigrants.
What about yours? I think yours is your history has been, they've been here for quite a long time, right?
Yeah, but it's and it's like when you look at different cities, like California is an interesting example. I lived in California for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
California was, it was part of Mexico originally, right?
Uh-huh.
Like we bought it.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of had a war with Mexico, the
Mhm.
Alamo and all that,
Mhm.
and then
Mhm.
out of that we got,
Yeah.
the Southwest.
Yeah. And all the cities are Spanish,
Yeah, and if you look at, if you go to California and you look at all the older structures in California, they're all from the Spanish era. They're,
Mhm.
they're adobe, they're pueblos,
Mm-hmm. Right.
But, and if you go to LA or San Francisco, you don't see a lot of structures that are very old. I mean, most of the growth in Los Angeles happened since the 20s, since the 1920s on, right? And, San Francisco, it all happened after the earthquake, which was in the late 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
So, that earthquake pretty much destroyed most of San Francisco. So, although San Francisco was there before that, you don't see any evidence of it in the architecture of the place, But the thing about California is almost everybody in California moved there from someplace else. And that's what you realize, especially Los Angeles. I mean, half the people in Los Angeles are from New York.
Yes.
And that's partly because of the entertainment industry, but there's like, this New York, LA cycle that
do you think it's still as like potent as it was before?
I think it still is, yeah, because I think there's a constant back and forth between New York and Los Angeles. The advent of the computer industry changed San Francisco. Before that, San Francisco was mainly a financial hub and a tourist city. Whereas, the growth of Silicon Valley and the whole computer industry, I mean, that totally changed San Francisco just as it did Seattle. You know, those industries didn't exist 40 years ago. I mean, not on the, I mean, yes, there was an IBM 40 years ago, but not like it is today. Not like, the juggernauts of finance. I mean, you look at this S&P 500. I mean, the big companies are the big five: Apple, Google, Facebook, Microsoft. Those are the companies that run our economy in America today. And they're bigger than most nations economically. And California financially, I mean, California is the fifth largest economy in the world. That means that, there's like the United States, China, India, I'm not sure who else, and California. And, there's, I mean, New York is big, but it's not as big as California. And that's the thing. It's like those places dominate our culture and they dominate our economic system. So.
You're listening to and watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world, streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. Like, share, subscribe, and follow. And thank you for watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. Yes.
Talking about ancestry, I mean, my family on my dad's side has been in North America for a long time. I mean, I can trace my ancestors back to, French Canadian. Well, actually, not even French Canadian, because there was no Canada then. It was just French.
There was no Canada.
It was just a French colony,
Okay.
Montreal, Quebec. I mean, 1600s.
Yes.
And when you look at it, it's funny because as a kid I never knew that. I didn't find that out till actually only about 8 or 9 years ago.
Like most of us.
Yeah. And I started doing research, and my sister really got into Ancestry.com, and the two of us were talking about it. And I have a cousin in the UP who actually traced the family all the way back to when they landed on these shores in 1604.
Oh my goodness.
And she actually, I don't even know how you do that.
Right.
I mean, it's how do you find stuff on the internet that
I think
is
people,
from before the internet?
I think other people have to be searching, and then they remain in the computer. And
I googled my great grandfather changed our name when he came to, I don't know when it was, but sometime in the 1800s. And so I googled the original name, and I found this website for this small fishing village at the mouth of the St. Lawrence Seaway, which was the original spot that the original people from France landed. It was the first town in North America in Canada.
Did
right?
you ever visit there?
No. But I have been to Montreal, and so I have a lot of family in Montreal and in Quebec, but I don't know any of them. I mean, it's like 300 years of people, right? But I found this website, and it blew me away. There was actually a website talking about all those people. I mean, it listed all the names of everybody that was on the boat.
Like, what kind of does it change you in a way to learn all that? Like,
Yeah,
does it create a
it blew
new
my mind.
emotion? And
It blew my mind. It was like, oh, like now I'm actually thinking, like, oh, I should go there and see who's there, or like go to that little museum that they had that the website talked about and see, like, there might be a painting of one of my ancestors.
Do you know how strange that is? Okay, I have on my mother's side, they were from Turkey, and the family was actually the Turkish royal family that was like pushed away, and they all went to Lebanon right before other people took over Turkey, and that's those people had the horrible Armenian genocide. So in a way, I'm glad we left. And so when they, it wasn't like a Gaddafi thing, like all of a sudden you're the you're the leader, and then suddenly you're running for your life. And no, it was they went to Lebanon, and that side of the family, they were given also positions as like ministers and mayors and all that kind of thing. But me, okay, little by little during my life, I'm learning this. I didn't really know it before. And so when I was living in Lebanon, I went on a little 4 day trip to Turkey. And I went, with the people I went with, and to these museums that were actually houses preserved from the ancient times, not the ancient times, the older times, like that generation I was talking about. And so I was actually visiting my ancestors' house, because that was their house. And I'm like, there's paintings on the wall, there's furniture, and I still didn't realize it at the time when I was visiting that, and like just putting everything together in the afterwards of it. And I really should go back there, and because that's the royal family's like castle is there, when people walk through it.
And this house that was your ancestors, how old was it?
It was from like the turn of the century, of the other century. Yeah, of like, because
like
I'm trying
early
to think.
1800s?
More later 1800s.
Okay.
My grandmother was born in the 1920s, and so it would have to be like 20 to 40 years before that. Well, it was right before the Armenian genocide, whenever that happened.
Okay. It's interesting because here in America, most people in America can't trace their ancestry back 300 years.
Mm-hmm.
So many people, like, on my mother's side, my great-grandfather came here in 1853,
Mm-hmm.
which was right before the Civil War. But that was, that was a lot later than 1604,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
And, we think of America, United States,
Mm-hmm.
as starting in 1776, but the truth is,
Mm-hmm.
Columbus landed in 1492. So
I just found out like 3 years ago that George Washington was not the first president, that he was the 8th president.
he was the 8th president.
Yeah,
Okay, tell me this story.
I don't know the story. All I know is that he's considered the first president because probably the Declaration of Independence was founded at that point. But before him, there were 7 others.
Okay, we're going to have to do some research on this, and we'll bring this to you.
You have
at
to do
another
a
time.
film on this, right?
This is actually interesting. This is like national treasure.
And it should be called the true history of America.
Well, we don't really know the true history because that would involve talking to the indigenous people who had a history
Yes.
way before anybody
But I
else
think
got
there are libraries in Spain that have certain books that are not accessible to the public, only to very special researchers, and you have to have permission to go there, but it's not impossible either. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
About
Very
Columbus, where Columbus came from, and yeah, his.
I had once when I was in the catering business, I had a client that was a Japanese sake company,
Mm-hmm.
Gaikukan. They're the largest sake company in the world, and they built a plant in California near Sacramento, and I was catering their Christmas party for them. And I was at their plant, and their plant was a brand new building that they'd built, and it was their first plant outside of Japan, I believe. And so we were walking around looking over the place, trying to get an idea of where we were going to put what for the party. And I was with the general manager, and I saw this photograph on the wall of this beautiful old building, obviously Japanese. And I said to her, that's a really cool picture. What is that? And she said, oh, that's our original plant. And I said, well, how old is it? She said, 350 years old. And I was like, well, why did you choose to put your original plant in a 350-year-old building? She says, oh, no, we built it. And it was just like my mind froze in that moment. It was like, this company has been in existence for 350 years, and they're still using the building that they built 350 years ago. Like here in America,
Yeah.
we don't have any buildings that old. You know?
Yes.
I mean, not that I know of. And maybe we do, but not like commonly like major businesses. You know, so it's that kind of thing. It's like we make so many assumptions as America, and we assume that the rest of the world is like our world, and it isn't. It's like and other people, like, you know, we're talking about refugees, and you know, how many of those people coming here how many of those people coming here have, you know, we look at them as, okay, they're going to be our janitors and our fast food workers, but in reality they're doctors and lawyers in their hometown.
Yeah,
you know,
that's it. Well, we have come to a close of another week of Mediterranean Fire on WJZZ. Thank you for tuning in. We'd